Good afternoon, students. Today's topic of discussion is retinoblastoma, a very important malignant condition affecting the eye in the childhood age group, pediatric age group. Retinoblastoma is the most common intraocular malignancy in children. If you see overall intraocular malignancy incidence, malignant melanoma tops the list, but as far as children are concerned, retinoblastoma is the most common intraocular malignancy. The reported incidence is 1 in 15,000 to 1 in 18,000 live births. Epidemiology, no racial or gender predisposition in the incidence of retinoblastoma, seen throughout the globe, all races, all gender. It is bilateral in about 25 to 35% of the cases involving both eyes. Average age at diagnosis is 18 months. Unilateral cases get diagnosed late by around 24 months, whereas bilateral cases they are detected early by 12 months. Historical part of retinoblastoma. Pavius described retinoblastoma as early as in 1597. In 1809, Wardrop referred the tumor as fungus hematose and suggested enucleation, that is the removal of the eyeball, as the primary mode of management. Discovery of ophthalmoscope in 1851 facilitated recognition of specific clinical features of retinoblastoma. It was initially thought to be derived from glial cells. It was called glioma of the retina by Virchow in 1864. Flexner and Wintersteiner, they believed it to be a neuroepithelioma because of the presence of rosettes. Later, there was a consensus that tumor originated from the retinoblasts, and the American Ophthalmological Society officially accepted the term retinoblastoma in 1926. Glioma and pseudoglioma are misnomers. It is now proved that it arises from the neural tissue and the cells which are precursors of the photoreceptors. So it is originated from the retinoblasts. That is why the term retinoblastoma. It can be heritable, it can be sporadic. Heritable means it will run in the families, but sporadic means it is because of the mutations. So mutations in the RB1 gene are responsible for most cases of the retinoblastoma. RB1 gene is a tumor suppressor gene, which means that it normally regulates cell growth and stops cells from dividing too rapidly or in an uncontrolled way. So most mutations in the RB1 gene prevent it from making any functional protein. So cells are unable to regulate cell division effectively. RB1 inactivation through point mutations, not that is frame shift, splicing, missense or promoter mutations are most often the first hit, while the second mutation is more likely to be chromosomal in nature, that is loss of heterozygosity. As a result, certain cells in the retina can divide uncontrollably to form a cancerous tumor. Here I will like to have a question for PG students about details of the genetics of the retinoblastoma. In that, what is the double hit hypothesis as far as genetics of retinoblastoma is concerned? It is not expected from the UG students in much details, but they will have to remember that the retinoblastoma is caused by deletion in the region of chromosome 13 that contains the RB1 gene. It is the long arm of the deletion of chromosome 13 which is responsible for retinoblastoma. Why it is important to know that? Because with this anomaly there will be again other associated anomalies because of this deletion of the long arm of the 13q chromosome. Retinoblastoma is the paradigm of the two-hit model carcinogenesis. From a genetic standpoint, three forms considered: familial heritable, that familial it is heritable, sporadic heritable, and non-heritable retinoblastoma. Familial retinoblastoma, 10% of the children with retinoblastoma inherit a RB1 gene mutation from a parent. Mutations in the RB1 gene appear to be inherited in an autosomal dominant pattern. In this circumstance, the condition is referred to as familial retinoblastoma. Every cell in the body of these children contains the RB1 gene mutation, the first gene. The mutation to the other copy of the RB1 gene, the second gene, occurs in the retinal cell sometime after conception. The inherited gene mutation is highly penetrant and nearly all, about 95% of such children develop retinoblastoma. So read in details about autosomal dominant pattern of the inheritance. Retinoblastoma is autosomal dominant with incomplete penetrance. So what do you mean by incomplete penetrance and how the autosomal dominant inheritance occurs and what is double hit hypothesis are the questions for postgraduate students. Now sporadic heritable retinoblastoma, another 30% of children with retinoblastoma also harbor the RB1 mutation in all of their cells and are at the same risk of developing retinoblastoma as children who inherit a mutation. These children do not have a parent with mutation as it is a sporadic heritable retinoblastoma. Rather, their RB1 mutation occurred as a new germline mutation. They will be able to pass the mutation on to their children. Non-heritable retinoblastoma, majority remaining 60% of the retinoblastoma patients have non-heritable disease. Their retinoblastoma develops as a result of mutations or changes in both alleles of the RB1 that occur in a single retinal cell sometime after conception and result in a lack of functional PRB. So these are the modes which are shown. So I will repeat this topic again. There are three forms of retinoblastoma. One is sporadic, one is heritable, and there is a so you will have to know the inheritance, autosomal dominant with incomplete penetrance. So and there is a double hit hypothesis. So all UG students who are more interested in knowing this should know double hit hypothesis and the pattern of dominant inheritance with incomplete penetrance. And in sporadic, we will have to know the chromosomal anomaly, that is deletion of long arm of 13q14 chromosome. That is also important to know because it will have other systemic associations with it when this chromosomal anomaly is present. Now variation in incidence, unilaterality and bilaterality. Vast majority of the children with familial or sporadic heritable retinoblastoma develop bilateral disease, though about 10 to 15% present with disease affecting only one eye. Rarely patients with the heritable form develop an intracranial midline primitive neuroectodermal tumor in addition to the disease of both retinae, leading to what is referred to as trilateral disease. And all non-heritable retinoblastomas are unilateral. So in short, non-heritable are unilateral, heritable are mostly bilateral, and there is an entity which is known as trilateral retinoblastoma. Trilateral is bilateral retinoblastoma plus tumor of the pineal gland. That is known as trilateral because of their common neurological origin. Histopathology of retinoblastoma. On low magnification, basophilic areas of tumor are seen along with eosinophilic areas of necrosis and more basophilic areas of calcification within the tumor. Calcification is the hallmark of the tumor. Poorly differentiated tumor consists of small to medium sized round cells with large hyperchromatic nuclei and scanty cytoplasm. Well differentiated tumors show the presence of rosettes and pleurotes. Flexure to interstitial rosettes consists of columnar cells arranged around the central lumen. This is highly characteristic of retinoblastoma is seen in medulloepicheloma. So flexure to interstitial rosette pattern is indicative of well differentiated tumor. Homerite rosettes is another form of rosette. They are also known as pleuretes. They consist of cells arranged around the central neuromuscular tangle. This is also found in neuroblastoma, medulloblastoma and medulloepiphyseal. Pseudorosette refers to the arrangement of tumor cells around the blood vessels. Pleurates are eosinophilic structures composed of tumor cells with pear-shaped eosinophilic process projecting through a fenestrated membrane. Rosettes and pleurates indicate that the tumor cells show photoreceptor differentiation. In addition, basophilic deposits, which are precipitated DNA, can be found in the walls of the lumen of the blood vessel. In short, if there is a presence of rosette and pleurate pattern, they indicate good differentiation. Otherwise, the tumors may be poorly differentiated. So these are the pictures showing. Left side is showing flexner interstitial rosettes, and right side is showing they are poorly differentiated. So how the child comes shows the clinical manifestation. Retinoblastoma is a disease which is characterized by various modes of manifestations. So when the child is brought by parents to the ophthalmologist, there can be variable manifestations. Most common is leukocoria. So it is the most common presenting sign. Leukocoria means white reflex from the pupillary area. Here I will like to have a question to the UGs and PGs both. Give differential diagnosis of leukocoria. What different conditions present with white reflex in the pupillary area? Enumerate all the conditions and write in short about them. Asymmetric white pupillary light reflex, cat's eye reflex, may be noted on photographs, so accidentally it may get noticed in dimly lit environments by the family. Strabismus is the next most common manifestation, and most of the times it is esotrophic. So 25% cases present with strabismus, ESO or EXO. Then there can be inflammatory symptoms like pseudopreceptal cellulitis, or there can be inflammatory like in the form of toxocariasis or endophthalmitis. These can be manifestations of the retinoblastoma. Poor vision can be a presenting feature in 10% of cases. Painful red eye, sometimes asymptomatic unilateral mydriasis, heterochromia iridis, that is different colors iris in two eyes. Hyphema can be a manifestation. Phthisis bulbi, vitreous hemorrhage, or hypopyon. This hypopyon is known as pseudo-hypopyon, as it is the settlement of the tumor cells at the bottom of the antechamber. Not in a true sense hypopyon, it is a pseudo-hypopyon. So these are the various manifestations. The point, clinically important point is, any manifestation in a pediatric age group, you will have to rule out retinoblastoma as on emergency basis, as retinoblastoma is not only question of patient's eye or vision, but it is a question of life and death of the patient. So you must rule out retinoblastoma in all these manifestations. So this uppermost is showing leukocoria as a manifestation. This cursor is showing hypopyon, retinoblastoma manifesting as hypopyon, and here it is manifesting as painful light like orbital cellulitis. If left untreated, retinoblastoma runs through the same stage as melanoma. So there are stages. Quiescent, where there is no activity, no complaints, no progression, lasts from 6 months to a year. Glaucomatous stage results in enlargement of the globe with apparent or real proptosis. Pain is severe during this stage and gets relieved when tumor bursts through the sclera, an event that usually occurs at the lemurs. Stage of extraocular extension, that is, you can say local metastasis, where now the tumor has come out of the eyeball into the orbit, extraocular intraorbit. Next stage is stage of metastasis, where first occurs in the preauricular and neighboring lymph nodes, later in the cranial and other bones. Cranium is the first bone earliest to get involved, then the other bones. Then there can be direct extension by continuity to the optic nerve, and brain is more common. So if you talk about metastasis, preauricular lymphadenopathy, original lymph nodes, or local metastasis in the orbit, other commonest mode of invasion is via optic nerve into the intracranial cavity to the brain or then to the cranial bones, and liver is the another site of distant metastasis. Early lesions are likely to be missed unless an indirect ophthalmoscopy is performed. Tumor appears as a translucent or white fluffy retinal mass. So this figure is showing the fluffy retinal mass. Tumor cells, they are shown as fluffy mass. Endophytic tumor is one which grows into the vitreous cavity, which can be seen on fundoscopy. A yellow-white mass progressively fills the entire vitreous cavity and vitreous seeds occur. Retinal vessels are not seen. Now, when the tumor progresses towards the vitreous cavity, naturally there occur seedlings in the vitreous, and beneath that retinal vessels may get obscured. That is the sign that the tumor is endophytic. Exophytic is the one where the tumor goes towards the core. Now, when it goes towards forward, it will lift the retina up, resulting into retinal detachment. So, on fundoscopy, you see picture as retinal detachment, and there will be vessels will be seen over the tumor here, whereas endophytic will hide the vessels. Diffuse infiltrating tumor is the third type, where the tumor diffusely involves the retina, causing a placoid thickness of the retina and not a mark. So it progresses transversely throughout the retina and not as a mass. So this is seen in older children, and it is very difficult to diagnose. It can be missed. So endophytic, exophytic, and diffuse infiltrating. Three types of tumors you may come across while examining the patients of retinoblastoma. Now, diagnosis, anti-segment examination involving the intraocular pressure, horizontal and vertical diameters, corneal diameters, shallowing of the chamber, or posterior segment by doing indirect ophthalmoscopy. You will have to post the child under GAEUA, examination under anesthesia. So as soon as you suspect, don't waste time, take the fitness of GA, post the child under GA, examination under anesthesia, under full vitreosis by doing indirect ophthalmoscopy. So vitreous should be examined for the presence or absence of retinoblastoma CD, hemorrhage, presence of abnormal vessels, fibrous membrane, inflammatory cells, or other abnormalities. Or if the disc and macula are visible, size and presence of any abnormalities should be noted. Now, depending upon the type of lesion, endophytic, exophytic, or transverse, appearance of retinoblastoma vary depending on size and location of the tumor, but detailed indirect ophthalmoscopy till periphery is extremely important in case of suspected cases of retinoblastoma. Fluorescein angiography pattern will be like this. FA vascular pattern shows normal filling of enlarged dilated vessels diving in and through a hyper and hypofluorescent tumor mass. Ultrasonography is extremely important. It will show ultrasonography can be done in A and B scan mode of using 10 megahertz transducer to image the posterior tube. Larger retinoblastoma lesions have a characteristic appearance on ultrasound because they produce calcium. That is, images will be calcified and easily detected by ultrasound, showing multiple areas of hyperreflectivity with acoustic shadowing. So any lesion where vitreous is filled with hyperreflective echoes and showing acoustic shadowing and showing evidence of calcification, then it is highly suspicious of retinoblastoma. The many times the lesion may be like cauliflower shape. A scan will show VY pattern in their picture, but more commonly it is the B scan which is very characteristic. Electroretinogram has been used to monitor function prior to and after treatment of retinoblastoma. In neuroimaging is ordered on all patients diagnosed with retinoblastoma at the time of diagnosis to assess orbit and optic nerve strain for pinealoblastoma. CT historically had very useful in identifying intraocular calcified lesions of retinoblastoma. So CT will be able to show the calcification. That is characteristic of retinoblastoma. But there you want to suspect the soft tissue involvement, like optic nerve. MRI has a role if the metastasis has occurred through the optic nerve in the brain. MRI has definitive role in diagnosing the retinoblastoma. MRI of the brain and orbits with and without contrast. Intraocular retinoblastoma T1 weighted images appears hyperechoic compared to vitreous and enhances with contrast. T2 weighted images RB lesions appear hypoechoic compared to vitreous. Now there are at least two classifications we have to study in detail. Out of that, this is Rees Elsworth, which I will not go into detail. It has prognostic importance and it is historical. No longer it is followed, but UG students can write this. It is okay. PG students must be knowing international classification of retinoblastoma in details. So as a homework, you write down in detail international classification of retinoblastoma. Remember, Rees Elsworth is not followed nowadays, whereas international classification is followed because it deals with the staging and the treatment method. Differential diagnosis, same as DD of leukoporia, POTS, persistent hyperplastic primary vitreous, toxopariasis, retinocytoma, astrocytoma, congenital cataract, retinopathy of prematurity, POTS disease, Norris disease. So there are many conditions which can be given as DD, and again in the homework, PG students will enumerate the conditions and write down each condition in detail. What is POTS? What is ocular toxopariasis? Like that, write down in detail. UG students can just write DD of leukoporia as DD of retinoblastoma. Now treatment has evolved from enucleation and exenteration to chemoreduction. So there is a lot of improvement as far as treatment of the retinoblastoma is concerned, and because of newer modality of treatment, now the prognosis has improved to a great extent. So this flow chart, try to understand. If there is unilateral retinoblastoma, and if the retinoblastoma otherwise normal, it is involving one eye, and the lesion is very small, how will you proceed? So this particular condition, it is fitting the local therapy. So it fits the criteria for local therapy. So what are the different modes of local therapy? You apply cryo to the mass. Generally cryo is for anterior most lesions where laser delivery is difficult, and small tumors. So small tumors anteriorly placed, go for cryo. Small tumors posteriorly placed, cryo should be given from the external side, from scleral side. First locate the tumor and from scleral side apply cryo. The next modality for local therapy is photocoagulation by laser. Now here these small tumors which are posteriorly placed, they are amenable to the laser photocoagulation, where laser delivery is through either indirect ophthalmoscope or through slit lamp. So that is local therapy in the form of photocoagulation. Third is plaque, where the radioactive material in the form of plaques is sutured to the sclera, and local radiation is given to the tumors. So all these three modalities are indicated for as a local therapy when the tumor is involved small and involving only one eye. If you have a good response, then you will have to keep patient under review. If the response is poor, you will go for chemoreduction. Chemoreduction is a concept where chemotherapy is given in the form of IV. The drugs we will discuss later on. Initially, this chemotherapy will achieve in reducing the size of the tumor. That is known as chemoreduction. So stark chemotherapy assess the tumors. You expect chemoreduction, reduction in the size of the tumor. So that will be called as good response. So tumor size is reduced. Now go for local as discussed previously. In spite of chemoreduction, if there is poor response, go for external beam radiotherapy. That is known as EBR. Now come to a second possibility. Unilateral retinoblastoma doesn't fit criteria of local. So tumor size is bigger, local therapy is not amenable. Go for chemoreduction. Good response, local therapy. Poor response, go for external beam radio. Chemotherapy agents are vincristine, carboplatin and etoposide. Large tumors, again chemoreduction done prior to attempt to local management. If it is not possible for local management like laser cryo or all chemoreduction measures fail, one has to go for enucleation. Question for undergraduates is differences between enucleation, evisceration and excitation. These are for UG students. For PG students, what precautions you are supposed to take while enucleating in the case of retinoblastoma? What precautions you are supposed to take while enucleating in the case of retinoblastoma? Then extension of the disease to the conjunctiva or orbital tissue warrant excitation of the orbital. Now, prognosis of retinoblastoma, if untreated, is always bad. Patient is invalidities. Success with chemoreduction for retinoblastoma, defined as avoidance of EBR and enucleation, was 100% for Group A, 93% for Group B, 90% for C, 47% for D international classification. This is for PG student. To correlate the international classification and give the prognosis again in detail.